Okay, let's begin. Good morning, everyone. The Gemara that we're holding on is page 46b, and the Gemara that we've been learning. So we learned a little Agadata Gemara yesterday, and then we learned also a Gemara that talked about benefiting from mitzvahs. Are you allowed to get benefit from an item? Excuse me, that's a mitzvah that's being used or was used that day. And the question was using a an item which really came up a little earlier in the Gemara, a few number of pages back, and here I guess you would say is maybe the main source, or here it does come up again. I guess you'd say it just comes up again over here. But the Gemara yesterday that we learned. So first of all, we spoke about the mitzvah of lighting a menorah, and the mitzvah of, and even a person doesn't light the menorah, but he also he sees, he's not lighting it, but he sees a menorah lit, and there's brachas that he recites. If it's the first night, he says two brachas. If it's other nights, he says one bracha. But you see a menorah lit, if you're not going to be lighting yourself, you also say a bracha. So that was the first Gemara that we were learning yesterday, and we spoke about Tosfos over here, the bottom Tosfos, and the bottom Tosfos mentioned that why don't we have a Birchas Haroya by other mitzvahs? We only have it by Chanukah. We don't have it by Lulav and Esrog. We don't have it by Sukkah. Why do you have a mitzvah? So a person's have a bracha for seeing someone who's doing a different mitzvah. And Tosfos ends up bringing in also mezuzah. Someone has a mezuzah on the door. Say a bracha. We could say a bracha. You don't have a house, okay, but that person does have a house. So Tosfos says other mitzvahs we don't find that they have such a bracha, brachas haroya. Number one, because there's some type of a chavivos when it comes to the nace of Hanukkah. There's a special chavivos, a special cherishing. People they cherish. So the rabbis felt that would be a reason to have a bracha. You're not going to light menorah, but at least because of chavivos hamitzvah, you should say a bracha. And the truth is, chavivos hamitzvah could mean that the rabbis felt that there's a chavivos of this hanes. There's a special cherishing of that nace, and people are obligated or should say a bracha. And so therefore, for Hanukkah, we say such a bracha. And we tried to bring in the fact that sukkah is also an element of a nace. Maybe there also you should have a chavivos hanes. I mean, we're supposed to think about that. The fact that the mitzvah in sukkah is to think about at least brought down that according to some you're supposed to have that in mind when you're dwelling in the sukkah, that Hashem protected us with clouds of glory. So seemingly there's a chavivos of that nace as well. And maybe there should be a berchas haroya. Someone sees people sitting in the sukkah, should be a berchas haroya. I guess there's something special about Hanukkah, or maybe it was more current. For whatever reason, Tosfos understands it, and I did not see commentaries talking about it, but there is a chavivos hanes on for Hanukkah. Then Tosfos says that there's also a concept of the fact that there are people who don't have houses, and this is a mitzvah on a house. Some people are traveling, people don't own a house, are homeless, and so therefore it would be a reason to say so sukkah and lulav, you didn't have such an issue, but the house, a lot of people who don't have, or are homeless, different situations. So therefore the rabbis felt that they should be able to have a bracha, at least we participate in the mitzvah of to be able to do the mitzvah of Hanukkah. So here they're going to be able to at least say the bracha of Hanukkah. So they'll participate in that mitzvah. You can't light, but at least you say the bracha of Hanukkah. Tosfos doesn't like that answer because it says, what about mezuzah? Now, there is a little question on this Tosfos, because you could answer that you see someone has a mezuzah on their house. Okay. You don't have a house. They do, and they have a mezuzah on their house. And Tosfos is saying, well, why didn't the rabbis make a bracha for me to recite I see someone has a mezuzah? it would make sense to say a bracha. If I see someone doesn't have if I see someone has a menorah and I don't have a house, so I don't light a menorah, I say a bracha on their menorah. Why don't I do a bracha on their mezuzah? So l'chayra, you could answer that question and say, well, the rabbis wanted me to be able to do the mitzvah of Hanukkah because it's an obligation on every yid. It happens to be that I don't own a house, and therefore I have no place to put a menorah. I don't have a house. That has to be a Pesach Beisai Mibachutz. You're supposed to put the menorah in a certain place in your house. I don't own a house. I'm not able to do the mitzvah. The mitzvah is an obligation on every individual. It happens to be you need to have a house in order to do this mitzvah. You could differentiate and say mezuzah is not that way. Mezuzah is an obligation. If you own a house, you have an obligation to have to put up a mezuzah. If you don't have a house, you don't have that such a mitzvah. The person for Hanukkah, every single yid is obligated in the mitzvah of Hanukkah. We're supposed to light them, even women, it says. I'm not, everyone's obligated, we're all obligated to light menorah. Okay, it happens to be, I sort of am going to miss out. I don't have a house. I'm traveling, I'm walking, or whatever. I'm exempt from I'm not able to do the mitzvah. So instead of being exempt, the rabbi said, okay, you're part of the obligation of Hanukkah. We're going to give you an opportunity to do some element of Hanukkah, and that is say a bracha when you see a menorah. The mezuzah, you could argue, is different. Taisus ends off with a question. He doesn't like this answer of, hey, you don't have a house. The rabbis gave you an opportunity for the menorah, you say a bracha. Taisus says, but what about mezuzah? They should have done the same thing for mezuzah. Say a bracha when you see mezuzah. You could say, no, mezuzah is only an obligation. It's not an obligation every yid. You need a mezuzah? No. I need to put tefillin on. I don't need a mezuzah. If I have a house, I have a mezuzah. If I live in a tent, if I live in my sleeping bag under the bridge, I'm not obligated to mezuzah. That's not an obligation on me. Hanukkah is an obligation on every yid. So look, so it would seem that you could argue with Taisus and say that this answer is a good answer. Hanukkah is different than mezuzah. Hanukkah is an obligation on every person. Mezuzah is an obligation on person on a house.
If a person, Rabbi, if a person doesn't own tefillin, but he sees somebody else put on tefillin, he doesn't say a bracha on the other person putting on tefillin.
Tefillin is an obligation on every person.
But a person doesn't own tefillin, then
you don't own tefillin. You ask someone to borrow tefillin. You know what I mean? It's not a common thing. It doesn't make it's not a normal thing. Here to talk about people that don't have a house. I mean, a lot of people don't. People are out there. They don't have a house, and what are they gonna do? They can't do they can't do mezuzah. No problem. Okay, don't do mezuzah. You're not obligated to mezuzah. But menorah Hanukkah is an obligation on every year. You're sort of like missing this. It's sort of like a technical difficulty here that you don't happen to have a place to put the mezuzah. You don't have a house to put the menorah. Okay, fine. It's like a technical difficult issue, but you really are obligated in menorah. Tefillin, you could say it's very different. Tefillin is not in the same. Is not a. In other words, Taisus is saying this is a logical, a practical type of issue that the rabbis wanted to overcome. They said, we're obligating everyone to light menorah. We have a little problem because the menorah's obligation. You need to have a place, a location to put the menorah. And we feel bad there's going to be people who aren't going to be able to do that. So we're going to overcome that by giving an opportunity for people who don't have a house. So in other words, the rabbi felt that this is a substantial sector of people that are homeless people now. Today's day and age, I don't know, maybe we have less of it. I don't know. California, they have a lot more, but but whatever it is, I don't know what the percentage was in those days. But the rabbis understood that would be a reason to establish a bracha for the. Now, people that don't have tefillin, what are you going to do? So those people, you expect them to borrow, right? I mean, you expect them to borrow, go to shul and get a pair. I mean, we're not making a bracha for raya of tefillin. You have an obligation. You should do it. That's like an automatic. You're not really exempt if you don't have. But Hanukkah, you could say you're somewhat exempt. I don't have a house. I'm somewhat exempt. The rabbis felt no. We want you to be participating, involved in the mitzvah. And we give you an opportunity. You say a bracha for roya. But the question Tysus has, what about the mezuzah? Okay, mezuzah is also, is connected to a house, and if you don't have a house, you're not gonna be able to do a mezuzah. So on this, Tysus is bothered. It's very different. But you could answer. There seems to be at least a thought, and it seems like Tysus might hold this, that in a certain sense, the obligation of Hanukkah is on the house, similar to mezuzah. That, which I guess maybe could be learned from Ner Ishu Vesai, that we do find the concept of that your house lights one menorah. It's good enough. Of course, we are mahadrin, every person lights, or you add a candle every night. But the concept of the how, it's almost like a similar thing. Like Taisus was understanding that Hanukkah and mezuzah are really very similar, that it's an obligation on the house. And just like mezuzah, if you don't own a house, you're really exempt. Hanukkah also, you're really exempt. It's not like an obligation on everyone. It's the same type of obligation. Same type of obligation. I have to put a mezuzah if I own a house. I have to do menorah if I own a house. If I don't own a house, I'm exempt. It's almost like an obligation on the house. And or if I rent a house, if I have a house, if I have a location where I live, that would be the obligation. And Taisa says, if you say a bracha of Raya, if the rabbis establish a bracha for Hanukkah, they should have established for mezuzah also, because in other words, Taisa is seeing it as a very similar obligation. That's not the common understanding, and I would seem to me that there must be other Rishonim, whoever offered this answer. Maybe other Rishonim might have this answer. Maybe they would understand mezuzah differently, Hanukkah differently, I should say. Mezuzah makes sense. Mezuzah is an obligation on the house. Menorah is an obligation on the individual, not on the house. You're Yitzchok. One person lights, Nerishu Vesai. One person lights, he lights in the house, he's fulfilling the mitzvah. But does that mean it's an obligation does that really mean that it's an obligation on the house? Menorah is an obligation on the house. It's a mezuzah's obligation on the house. You have a house, you need a mezuzah. You rent, you own, you have menorah. You would think of it more of as an obligation on the individual, and the technical element of it is that you need to have a house, or you have to have a place where you put it. But here we're saying that it's Taisa seems to be holding that it's more of it's a similar obligation to mezuzah, and therefore, if you say a roya is chayiv for, say a bracha for Hanukkah, you'd also have to, roya would be chayiv for mezuzah also, and then Taisa doesn't like that answer, and therefore he likes his answer of chavivos hanes. Anyway, the final answer that Taisa says is that that roya only says a bracha that the person who does the mitzvah says, and that only works with Hanukkah because there are brachas that you say shasa nisim b'avesina b'yom himzman hazeh. That bracha would be apropos for someone who sees it as well. All the other mitzvahs, you don't have such an option, and there's no brachas that are apropos for someone who sees it. And therefore, Taisus understands that you could differentiate between these mitzvahs. Okay, so that was Taisus. And then the next Gemara was about was a Gadata Gemara. Seemingly, it was emphasizing the importance of learning Torah when you're young, because then when you grow older, you will be able to add on to it, and it's never too much. But if you didn't learn when you were young, so it's going to be hard for you when you get older. Now, that sounds to me like it's encouraging for, at least it's encouraging for young people that they should learn. But it sounds discouraging a little for someone who didn't learn when they were young. To me, it sounds like that's it's sort of minimizes your inspiration to want to learn when you're older, because, well, I guess I didn't learn when I was young. So I guess it's just saying that expect it to be hard, meaning don't get turned off. Maybe it is also an inspiration. In other words, it's not going to come easy. The insight of this I got it to piece of this piece of Gemara is that if it seems hard to you, yeah, it's hard because you didn't learn when you were younger, and therefore when you get older, it is going to be harder because the way Hashem works is a vessel that's full, you always add on to it. That's by Hashem. In the physical world, a vessel that's full, you can't fit anymore. But in the spiritual world, by Hashem, by Ruchnias Inyanim, it works the opposite way, that the more Ruchnias you have, the more space you'll have for Ruchnias. So that, I guess that's how you understand, you could learn it. Now, the other thing that it mentions here, excuse me, the Gemara says, Davar Acher, another pshat, and that is all about Chazara. If you learn Shemaya B'Yashan, if you do Chazara, if you review in the old stuff, then you will be able to learn new stuff and add on and take advantage of what you learned already because you have previous knowledge and you reviewed it, it'll benefit you for the future stuff that you learn. And if you don't review, if you don't review, so then and you yifne levavcha, you refrain from you turn your mind away, your heart away from studying, from reviewing, and you sort of like give up on reviewing. And Rashi uses the word lehisyayesh, which is giving up hope. You give up hope from ever reviewing it. So then shuv loisishma, you won't be able to to grasp it or to learn more, because it's like it's based on a pasuk that if you turn your heart away, you will end up not being able to learn. So how important it is to review, basically, that if you review, it'll benefit you greatly. You'll be able to add a lot more learning, because your what you learned before will be a good basis for adding on to that. Okay, so that was this Agadata little piece. And then the Gemara talked about the laws of iskatzoy, of muktzah. And this muktzah is similar to Shabbos, where something is set aside for use that's not appropriate for Shabbos. So on Shabbos, you wouldn't be able to use it. But of course, there are a lot of exceptions to the rule in Hilchos Shabbos. It depends on what type of muktzah, how much is it set aside. For example, certain things are set aside. If you use it for a permissible thing, it could be permitted. If it's set aside for no use, then it becomes a problem. I'll give you an example. You have a pencil, so it's used for writing. So that pencil, if you want to use it to scratch your forehead with the pencil, so that on Shabbos should be permissible, because it's a klisha malachtoilius, or it's a vessel that's used for meant for prohibited things, but you want to use it for a permissible thing. You're allowed to scratch your forehead, so that should be that would be permissible on Shabbos. But on the other hand, if you want to take a rock, and the rock is no use, there's no purpose to have a rock, and you want to now use it as a doorstop, so the law is that is muktzah. You had no intention ever to use it. It was muktzah from your mind. I wasn't planning on using a rock. I don't play with rocks on ever. So now I found that there's a rock in my yard, and I'm going to now take it to make as a door stopper. That would not be allowed on Shabbos, because before Shabbos I didn't set it aside to use for a door stopper. What did I do? I set it away from my mind as if I'm never going to use it. I'm not touching rocks. I don't play with rocks. I don't touch rocks. But now that I want to use it, I would like to take it. No, it's muktzah. I said it. I moved it away from my mind before Shabbos. It became muktzah. A similar concept is by mitzvahs. This is an esrog. It's meant for the mitzvah. I'm not allowed to use it now to eat. I can't go and eat it. This is a mitzvah item that's used for the mitzvah. And the question in the Gemara is, to what extent is it set aside? It's used for the mitzvah. So I'm going to be using it to shake lulav and esrog. Does that end when I finish shaking lulav and esrog on Hoshana Rabbah? Hoshana Rabbah, I stop lulav and esrog, shaking lulav and esrog. So in the morning after I go to shul, can I now benefit from this esrog? I want to take a bite out of it. I want to use it for my tea. So would I be allowed to squeeze this esrog into my tea? So that would be the question. When does it end? When does the muktzah end? Or does it last the entire day? Is it similar to Shabbos? That if something is muktzah when Shabbos enters, it becomes muktzah for the whole day of Shabbos? Or do we say a muktzah for a mitzvah is a little different? It's a different concept somewhat. And maybe the muktzah ends right after I finish using it for the mitzvah. Where does this apply? So where in our Gemara it's being used for the mitzvah, for the using an esrog for your own enjoyment, which would be to eat, or using a sukkah for your own enjoyment, which would be to burn the wood for make a fire to use to heat to cook food or something. So you want to use the wood from the sukkah for another purpose. Can I use it on Shmini Atzeres in Eretz Yisrael? Would I be allowed to use it on Eretz Yisrael? They stop sitting in the sukkah. They stop living in the sukkah on Hoshana Rabbah. And then Shmini Atzeres comes along. So when does it become permissible for me to use it? Now, there's another element here that has to be mentioned, and that is that something that's set aside in the twilight zone, in the time where it's in between day and night, in that gray area, where we're not sure if it's considered day or night, it's called Bein Hashmashas. In that time period, those moments of Bein Hashmashas, so there's if during that time it's set aside for the mitzvah, it's going to be set aside for the whole next day. That's a concept of muktzah, that once something is set aside in that time, that would be set aside. That's the way it works for at least for Shabbos. So here the Gemara wants to use it and say, well, seemingly it would apply to mitzvahs as well. So let's read the Gemara inside. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. We're page 46b. I'm going to start at the 7th line from the top of the page, 6th line from the top of the page. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says 46b. Esrog b'shvi aser b'shmini mutter. An esrog on the 7th day is prohibited. On the 8th day, it is permissible. What does this mean? I want to eat the esrog. So Rabbi Yochanan says on Hoshana Rabbah, the 7th day is aser, it's prohibited to eat it. The whole 8th day, the whole 7th day. B'shmini, but the 8th day is going to be permissible. Sukkah, using the sukkah wood, the walls of the sukkah. I want to use them want to use them for burning purposes. Afilu b'shmini asura. Even on the 8th day is going to be prohibited. So Rabbi Yochanan holds that that I wouldn't be allowed to use the wood for burning purposes, even on the 8th day. Now, we don't dwell in the sukkah on the 8th day. So what would be the logic behind that? The logic would be that the fact that the sukkah was needed for the twilight zone of the night before the 8th day, which is questionable if it's day or night. It might be Hoshana Rabbah still, or it might be the 8th day Shmini Atzeres has entered. We're not sure. During that time period, it would be considered set aside for the mitzvah, because I still need to dwell in a sukkah just in case it's called daytime. And therefore, during that time, it was called the whole next day, Shmini, it's going to be asura, prohibited. That's Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Now, what does Reish Lakish say? Reish Lakish Amar Esrog afilu bashvi'i nami mutter. And Reish Lakish says in Esrog, even on even on the 7th day, it's permissible. So what would the reason for Reish Lakish be? The reason for Reish Lakish would be that once I finish using it for the mitzvah, it's over. That was, it's based on the mitzvah. The mitzvah is over, it's over. Rabbi Yochanan seems to follow this concept of the whole day. Kula yom is katzoy. It's set aside for the whole day. Now, the Gemara says, okay, what are they arguing about? Martaver Master says, which is Reish Lakish, mitzvah katzoy, it's set aside for the mitzvah. So therefore, it only applies until you finish shaking the lulav and esrog. Once I finish shaking the lulav and esrog, on Hoshana Rabbah, I could already eat the esrog because I finished doing my mitzvah. So it's set aside for the mitzvah. The mitzvah is done. Now I could eat it. Umar Savar Master holds, Rabbi Yochanan, the Kule Yoima is katzoy. It is set aside for the entire day of Hoshana Rabbah, and it would not be permissible until after Hoshana Rabbah is over, because the whole day it ends up taking on a certain level of mitzvah, whole set-asideness, that you can't use it. So Reish Lakish asked a question to Rabbi Yochanan, and he asked him a question from our Mishnah. And our Mishnah had said that they would eat the esregim after they finish shaking the doing the ceremony of the Arava ceremony. So if they would eat the esregim, that sounds like Reish Lakish, because once you do the mitzvah, now it's exempt. So Esrei Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish asked a question of Rabbi Yochanan that I think I have a proof that you're allowed to benefit from the mitzvah item, which is the esrog, to eat it right after you finish shaking it, because you see in the Mishnah it says that from the hands of the children they would take the lulavim and eat the esrogim. So my lav, isn't it talking about huadin? It would also mean that the esrogim of the adults, you would also be allowed to eat those esrogim. Why? Because once we finish the mitzvah, we're allowed to eat the esrogim. So the Gemara pushes off this proof, and it says, "Lie, it's not a proof. It's not true. It's not hu adin l'gedolim. It's not the same law applies to the adult, the esrogim owned by adults, because Tinaikas Davka, maybe it's only children's that are not exactly a full-fledged mitzvah. It's not called a mitzvah gemura, and the reason would be that it's only a mitzvah of chinuch, that the children are using these, but really it's not a full-fledged mitzvah. And because of that, the gedolim's esrogim, you would not be allowed to use a whole day. The children's, only the children's would be permissible, because they're not a real mitzvah item, and therefore Rabbi Yochanan holds that the children's, even that's okay, that you could use, but the adults, a whole day, it's going to be prohibited. So in other words, we don't have a proof from the Mishnah, because the Mishnah talks about children's esrogim. It doesn't talk about adults esrogim, and that was at least that was the way Rashi had learned the Mishnah, the way that it was talking about children taking the adults. Adults taking the children's esrogim. That was the understanding there. That the adults would play some type of game, taking the children's esrogim and eat it, and it would basically be simcha, and that was so the way the Gemara understands it now is, at least the way Rabbi Yochanan is going to understand it, is that it's only the children's and not the adults ones, because the adults ones would be prohibited to eat a whole day of Hoshana Rabbah. And there it implies, like right after they finish the ceremony, that they would eat the esrogim. Now, the Gemara then says there's another version of this proof, and the other version actually pulls it the other direction. Some say Rabbi Yochanan that Rabbi Yochanan used this as a proof against Reish Lakish to show him that, you see, the whole day you're not allowed to have the esrog and eat it. You have to wait till the next day, because the whole day it becomes usher. What was his proof? You look at the Mishnah, that they would take it from the hands of the children. They would take the lulavim and eat the esrogim. That only the children's they would take, but the adults ones, that you would not be able to take, because the adults ones is prohibited for the mitzvah all day. And so that was his proof that I'm right. You see, Rabbi Yochanan proves the whole day is usher. Children's is not a real mitzvah. It's a chinuch mitzvah. That's okay. You can eat their esrogim. But for the for the adults esrogim, that you wouldn't be allowed to take. You see in the Mishnah, only says from the hands. So on that, the Gemara answers no. The law, same law would apply even to adults. Really, the law applies to the adults esrogim also, and it mentioned the children's ones because that was the common thing to play with some type of game with the children. They would take the children's esrogim and you normally wouldn't do it to an adult. I don't know, the adult would get angry, but the children, they sort of were part of this playing this game, and therefore it was the Mishnah picked that case. But the halacha, Reb Shlokish says, would apply to adults also. It's permissible. Once you want, you're allowed to use. Once you did the mitzvah, you're allowed to use it. Now, there was another way of learning this Mishnah. And the other way of learning the Mishnah was miyad, immediately after they finished the ceremony, the children would take out their lulavim and eat their esregim. They wouldn't play a game with the adults. They would just immediately now we did the mitzvah, and now we're going to eat our esregim. We'll play with our lulavim and eat our esregim. And so the adults didn't take the children's. It was the children eating their own esregim. And if you learn it that way, you have to reread the Gemara. How do you reread the Gemara? So the Gemara over here says that Rish Lakish asked a question to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, you hold that the esrog is muktzah for the entire day. Here you see that the children ate their esrogim. The children ate their esrogim right away. And miyad, it even says the word miyad. Normally in the Mishnah, they would take it from, and because the Mishnah mentions this right after Arava, okay, so it happened right afterwards. Here, according to this way of reading the Mishnah, it's miyad. Immediately, the Tinaikas would pull off, we finished our ceremony, the children are eating their esrogim. So what do you see from there? So Reish Lakish says, they ate their esrogim. So the children, it says they would eat it right away, the esrogim. It means the adults also would. I don't know if they liked the esrogim. I don't know if they had such a desire. They might have liked wine or meat. But the children, they grabbed the esrog that was like excited. They had it in their hand. They immediately took a bite. So it says, "Who adin l'gdalim." The same law should apply to the adults probably, and that they would be allowed. So you see, Reish Lakish tells Rabbi Yochanan, and you see that once you finish the mitzvah, I'm allowed to eat it. The children did it, and probably the adults also. So the Gemara says, no. It says the children did it. Tinaike stop. Only the children did it, not the adults. The children ate theirs. And again, this is the same the concept that the children they ate the esrogim. The adults wouldn't do it. The children maybe did it against halacha, possibly. That's the way it's, at least the understanding is. The children they didn't know the halacha. It's katsoi, it's muktzah for the whole day. They ate it. The adults wouldn't do it. You're not allowed to, and you're not allowed to. That's Rabbi Yochanan's answer. And then comes the next Gemara, the other pulling the string the other direction. Ika de'ami. Some say that Rabbi Yochanan asked this as a kasha on Reish Lakish. That you would immediately the children would slip out the lulavim and they would eat their esrogim. So Rabbi Yochanan says, Reish Lakish, you see what's going on here? That it says the children would do this. You see, the adults are not allowed to do this. Why? Because it's muktzah for the whole day. So it's pretty clear proof from the Mishnah. Tonight is in Gedolim Loi. So the Gemara answers, no, that Reish Lakish understood the Mishnah not to mean that it's only the children did it. The adults also did it, but it doesn't. The common thing was the children grabbed the esrog. They wanted a bite of esrog. To them, that was they thought it would taste good. Maybe they didn't realize how bad it tastes. But the adults, they weren't grabbing it, so fast. So the Mishnah mentions the time, but the Gedolim did the same thing. Why? Because they finished their mitzvah already. So that's the way Reish Lakish would learn the Mishnah. So again, there was two pshatim in the Mishnah. Now Rashi over here tells us that he doesn't like this pshat. He brings this pshat over here, and he says, I don't like it. Why? So Rashi says, because there's a medrash. Rashi says Bereshis Rabbah, but on the side I see they bring it's really a medrash in Vayikra Rabbah. The medrash Rabbah in Vayikra says a story. And what's the story? Mentions that there was a chassid that gave money to a poor person. His wife got fed up with him because, we hardly have money for food, and you're going and giving money to a poor person. You gave a dinar to a poor person. So he ran out of the house and he had no money. And so it was the Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah came. So he went and he took the esrogim from the children. It says miyad tinaikos. He took the esrogim from the children, as it says in the Mishnah, from the hands of the children they would slip out the esrogim, and that chassid went in a boat ride to some other country, and turned out that the king had put out a proclamation: I need esrogim for whoever brings an esrog will get a good reward. And for medicine, we need esrogim. Anyone have esrogim? And he made a whole proclamation. Turns out this chassid arrived right then, and he was able to get a huge amount of money, sold them to the king for a great amount of money, and he went back because of his tzedakah that he did. And so he gave a little coin to tzedakah. His wife got angry at him, and this whole story happened, and he went. Now, what do you see from this? What you see from here is that the way the Medrash learns the story is that the adults would take the esrogim from the children. That's how you see the Medrash learns it. Not that the children would do it, because the way the Medrash says it is that this adult, this man, took esrogim from the children, as it says in the Mishnah, from the children they would slip out the esrogim. So in other words, the Medrash learns it that it's the adults would take the esrogim from the children, and as we saw in Tosfos before, it's not considered gzela. It's not a problem. It's doing it out of simcha. It's out of joy of we're rejoicing, and so it's like a fun day, and we're play a game and take the esrogim, and that was acceptable. It wasn't considered gzela. It's not a problem, and so that's the way Rashi. So Rashi doesn't like the other pshat, because Rashi says we have a source in the Medrash that it learns this is the way to put the grammar, put the comma, and translate it. Now Tosfos has a different way. Tosfos says, no, I like this pshat, and he has a different problem. Tosfos has a problem with the way the other pshat, the way Rashi learns it. And Tosfos says that there's two dalids that are missing. What's missing? According to Tosfos says, this is the Tosfos on the Mishnah, where it said that miyad, where the Mishnah had said this statement miyad. What does it say? Miyad hatinoike shemtines l'lo. So it says that from the hands, or the way Tosfos is learning is that immediately the children would slip out would take the lulavim and eat their esrogim. Now, the way Rashi was learning it is miyad hatinaikos, from the hands of the tinaikos, shaimtin es lulavehem, va'eichlen esrogim. They would from the way Rashi had learned that the adults would slip it out from the hands of the children, and they would eat their esrogim. Now, the way Rashi is learning, and when you see in the Gemara, the way the Gemara had asked questions on Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan that we just learned. So Tosfos says it should say ditinoikos. Are we talking about the children eating versus the adults eating? Or are we talking about the lulavim in the esrogim of the children and the lulavim in the esrogim of the adults? So Tosfos says, according to Rashi's pshat, we're talking not about the children, what the children did, that the children would eat the esrogim. We're talking about the adults eating the esrogim of the children. That's what we're talking about. The esrogim of the children were those esrogim considered iskatzoi lemitzvah. That's the way Rashi is learning. He says, if so, we're not talking about the children themselves. We're talking about the esrogim of the children. So it should say ditinoikos in digadolim loy. It should say the esrogim of the children, the esrogim of the adults. The way Tosfos learns, he says, for me, it's not a problem. We're not talking about the esrogim of the children and the esrogim of the adults. I'm talking about what the adults did and what the children did. The adults, the adults, either they were allowed to eat their esrogim or they weren't. either it's iskatzoy or it's not. And the children were either allowed to eat their esrogim or they weren't. You know, the children would eat their tinoikas in. They did eat their esrogim. But we're not talking about the esrogim of the children as much as we're talking about what the children did. And that's the way Tosfos is learning, because we're not dealing with, is it the esrog of the children that maybe is not muktzah. We're not dealing with that. We're talking about what the children did versus what the adults did, and therefore you don't need to add that dalid for the grammar of the ditinoikos or Okay, yes, David.
There's a note here that says most commentaries do not explain the Gemara as Rashi does, that the children themselves remove the loving from their hands and eat their own esrogim. Of course, no proof for halachic matters can be cited from the practice of children, since they cannot be relied upon to fulfill all aspects of halacha. See Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah. Some authorities suggest that Rashi's explanation is in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish, and Rambam's explanation is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan.
I don't know. That note to me is a little strange. Rashi is trying to explain the Gemara. I don't know. I'd have to look at that. I mean, that's a little deep. You gotta what does he say? I mean, Rashi brings a proof to his. Tosfos brings a proof to his explanation. They both seem to have sources why they're explaining it this way. And why is Rashi fit more with Reish Lakish? Again, I think that note needs a little deciphering. Needs to be. Yeah.
He said some parties suggest that Rashi's explanation in accordance with the opinion of Reish Lakish. Rambam's explanation is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan.
Already read that.
I mean, you have to explain the Gemara according to both. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're trying to explain the Gemara here. So, yeah, I'd have to see the whole thing. Maybe I could understand what it's saying, but can't really help you. If you want, you can take a picture of it, send it to me after. I'll take a look and see.
Should I share the screen?
No, but after the class, if you want to take a picture of it and send it to me,
okay.
I'll try to figure it out what it means to say. It sounds like a juicy note. It just from the surface, it doesn't sound understandable. Okay, I did want to just mention there is a interesting word here. Tosfos had told us that the reason why they would take the others esrogim, it was they didn't have to worry about it, was because it's simcha. And Tosfos says, and from here you have a source that they used to be accustomed that at weddings they would do these somewhat wild types of activities, and you don't have to pay, because people are meichel, people forego on the if you rip their clothes or something. Sometimes something would get ripped, or the horse would get wounded or something. They're patur because it's done because of simchas chasan. So Tosfos mentions this idea that's why it was that the bachurim that ride on horses for the chasan, and they have a little like fight together, and sometimes the clothing rips of someone, of one of them, they're meichel, they forego on it. So the Chassam Sofer says that based on this, you could explain what was going on when Adam Harishon was being rebuked by Hashem. Hashem told him, why did you eat from the tree, from the Eitz Hadas? So Adam Harishon, what does he answer? He says, Ha'isha asher nasatali, the woman who you gave me. So she told me to eat from the Eitz Hadas. So the Chassam Sofer says, what was Adam Harishon really saying? He's saying, you're telling me that I stole? This is a chasana. This is the woman that you gave me. She was telling me to eat from this. This is part of our simchas chasan b'kala. And so you think I stole from a tree? I wasn't that's not mine. No, it's simchas chasan b'kala. We're all celebrating, and so therefore it's not an issue of geneva. So the Eibishter says, yeah, it's not a problem of zela, of stealing, but there's a problem of my cholas asurais, eating things that are prohibited. So, from the issue of chasan v'kala, no problem. But the fact is, it's called maicholas asuros, called prohibited food. It's a style of drush that you sort of like bring halachic rules into a story of the chumash. You bring different halachas. So based on this Tosfos that we mentioned when we learned the Mishnah about the concept of being exempt when you're involved in a simchas chasan v'kala, so that gives a little explanation of why Adam Arishan said that the wife that you gave me, she told me to eat from this. So it's okay. That's just a little drush over there. Okay, fine. Now the next, so where are we holding here? We're up to Levi. Is that what we're up to? No, we're up to Amalei Rav Papa Labai. Okay. Amalei Rav Papa Labai. So let me tell you where we are. Amalei Rav Papa Labai. Rav Papa tells Abaye. Amalei Rav Papa Labai. Rav Papa tells Abaye the Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan. What's the reason that there's a difference between Sukkah and Esrog? Sukkah, we said that you would not be allowed to benefit from the walls of the Sukkah, even on Rabbi Yochanan says Sukkah filo b'shmini asura, even on the 8th day is asur by Sukkah. By Lulav, he says that you would be allowed on the 8th day, just not allowed on the whole 7th day. Rabbi Yochanan said the whole day becomes muktzah. That's Hoshana Rabbah, but the 8th day would be permissible. So the question is, what's the difference? So we sort of explained this already, but because based on the answer of the Gemara, the answer is Amalei Sukkah dechazil ben hashmashas. Sukkah is fitting for ben hashmashas, meaning that you do need to have a sukkah during ben hashmashas. What happens if you have a srami lesudaso by mesav begava? You would need to eat if it happens that you're going to have a suda. You need to sit in the sukkah mechel, but begava you'd have to eat in it. Why? Because it's still possibly the 7th day. It's this in between area. Time. It's in between day and night. We're not sure if day passed already and it's the night. And therefore, if the day passed already, it would be permissible to not eat in the sukkah. But because it might still be day, you need to eat in the sukkah. So therefore, it's because the sukkah is needed for bein hashmashas. I'm still involved in a mitzvah bein hashmashas. It means that the sukkah is a mitzvah bein hashmashas. The whole day, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that whole day becomes prohibited. It's got soil bein hashmashas. So migu diskatzoy ben hashmashas, umigu diskatzoy ben hashmashas diskatzoy l'kul yom dishmini. Since it becomes prohibited for ben hashmashas for this time period that's gray, called ben hashmashas. So once it gets set aside for the mitzvah, then it gets set aside for the whole 8th day. Esrog dolei chazil ben hashmashas, the esrog that's not fit for the ben hashmashas period. Lo iskatzoy. The esrog is not fit for the bein hashmashas. Why? Because we shook it already in the morning. So so therefore, there's no need for it during bein hashmashas. Therefore, it's not set aside for the mitzvah bein hashmashas during bein hashmashas during that time, and therefore the whole 8th day is going to be permissible. It's not going to be prohibited for the whole. It's not going to be set aside for the whole day of the 8th day. It's not muktzah. It's not muktzah, and that doesn't become set aside. The Levi Amar Esrog Afilu B'Shmini Aser. Levi has a bigger chumrah. He says, you know what? It's a suffix. It's also the whole 7th day. It means it's going to be Aser also Ben Hashmashas. It's also Ben Hashmashas. The whole next day is Aser. So Levi has a chumrah, even the 8th day is going to be Aser. That you can't benefit from the lulav even on the 8th. That's, of course, an extra chumrah. Okay. Abu Shmuel, Amar, Abu Shmuel says, Esrog B'Shvi Aser B'Shmini Mutter. The esrog is prohibited on the 7th day, but on the 8th day, it's going to be permissible. Who does that go like? Rabbi Yochanan or Reish Lakish? Anyone? Who is the father of Shmuel following? He says on the 7th day, it's going to be prohibited the whole day, not only until you do the mitzvah, even after you finish the mitzvah, the whole day becomes asur, but on the 8th day, it's going to be permissible. That is following Reb Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says that the muktzah for a mitzvah prohibits it for the whole day. That's Rabbi Yochanan's shitas. That's Avur Deshmul is following Rabbi Yochanan. Come Avur Deshmul b'shitzei Esrog b'shmini mutter. Come avoid the Shmuel b'shitzei de Levi. And then the father of Shmuel changed his mind. He says, you know what? That's too lenient. I really want to follow. I'm changing my mind, and I'm going to follow Levi. That on the 8th day, even the 8th day is going to be prohibited. Come Rabbi Zera b'shitza davur de Shmuel. But Rabbi Zera stayed with his opinion, with the opinion of the father of Shmuel, that the original opinion of the father of Shmuel, and he said that the 7th day is prohibited, but the 8th day is permissible, like Rabbi Yechon. Dam Rabbi Zera, because we find that Rabbi Zera says esrog shenifsala, an esrog that becomes invalid, also lo'echla kol shiva, says prohibited all 7, but the 8th day doesn't say it's prohibited. So an esrog that becomes invalid, it's prohibited all 7, but it doesn't say that it's going to be prohibited for the 8th day. Now, the Gemara continues, and now it talks about another issue. The other issue that the Gemara talks about, something we've talked about before, and that is that when you give a child the lulav and esrog, there is a problematic, because the child is not going to be able to give it back to you, and then you're not going to own it, and then you're not going to fulfill the mitzvah properly, because which means you're not going to fulfill the mitzvah at all, really. Because if you didn't shake lulav and esrog, then you have a big problem. So Amr Zera liknei inish shana linuka b'yamatava kama. On the first day of Yom Tov, Yom Tov Kama means Yom Tov, the first one, you shouldn't give a child, Yanuka as a child, Hoshana. Hoshana is a term used for the lulav. Don't give the child a lulav on the first day. My time, what's the reason? The Yanuka mitnakani, because the child will be able to gain ownership. And there's a discussion exactly how the child gains ownership, but Rashi understands it to be that it's a rabbinic law that that the child will be able to own the lulav. A child has a kinyan midrabana, and therefore, so the child will be koine aknuye loy makni, but the child will not be able to give it back to you. Because if he's not a bardas, he doesn't have the ability to give a gift, and doesn't have the knowledge, and he's not able to give it as a gift. And comes out that he's gonna hand it back to you, but the kinyan is not effective. So really, it's the child's. He's saying I'm giving it to you, but it's not true, and because it doesn't, he doesn't have the knowledge, the das, to be able to be makna something to you, to give something back to you. And therefore, it comes out that you're fulfilling a mitzvah of lulav, but that's not yours, and basically you're not fulfilling the mitzvah. You're using a lulav. You're nafik b'lulav. You're going out with a lulav that's eina shalei, that's not yours. So that's Reb Zera's statement. And of course, this is a topic of a lot of discussion, which we have had. The famous question of, do you need to buy your children, each of them, their own lulav and esrog? Once they reach the age of 5 or 6, once they know how to shake the lulav in different directions, would that be, would you need to buy them their own lulav and esrog? And it gets problematic, especially because if you have a few children, you got to buy each of them. Of course, lulav and esrogim are not cheap. And so the question is there any way around it? And so in Shulchan Aruch, it seems that there's two options that, again, we've spoken about. There's an argument if it works. I always just buy my children their own lulav and esrog, because that's, of course, cover all grounds. But there seems to be a heter, and the heter would be, I shouldn't say everyone agrees with this, but there is a heter that's mentioned. What is the heter? In Shulchan Aruch, it brings down this concept of, if you don't hand it to the child, you still hold it, so then the child can shake it, and it's not a problem. Because you didn't really, the giving over to him was not a full giving over, and therefore it's not a problem. You don't have to worry about you're not getting it back. But the commentaries debate. So if you do that option, which the Shulchan Aruch mentions, does that mean that you've done the mitzvah of chinuch, and the child has fulfilled his obligation of chinuch? Or does that just mean that you didn't ruin your lulav? In other words, in the Shulchan Aruch, it's a little vague. If the Shulchan Aruch's option is telling you that you can get away with doing this and you fulfilled your chinuch mitzvah, or the wording of the Shulchan Aruch just says that you didn't ruin your lulav. So because it's vague, therefore there's room for debate, and there's a machlokes in the commentaries. The Magen Avraham holds one way. I think the Birkei Yosef maybe holds the other way. Basically, it's a debate if you actually fulfill the mitzvah that way. So of course, the ideal is to give each child their own lulav and esrog, and especially outside of Israel, you have this problem because if the second day of Yom Tov, you want to be able to fulfill the mitzvah according to all opinions, because second day Yom Tov, the fact that we live outside of Israel makes it even more of a problem. Why? Because in Israel, if you have one child, then you have a very easy way out. You shake lulav first, give it to your whole family to shake with, and as long as you're not expecting any guests and you're not going to be going out, so you've all fulfilled the mitzvah already. Now take it, give it to your child who's 5 or 6 years old, and let him give it to him as a gift. And then in Eretz Yisrael, what's the big problem? You all did the mitzvah on the first day properly. Even your son, who's 6 years old, did the mitzvah properly. He owns it. And the next day comes around. Next day is Chol HaMoed. Chol HaMoed, you don't have to own your lulav. So all you got to do is ask your son for if you could borrow it. He just hands it back. Whatever, you don't have to own it. So the thing is that what is that?
You just said the first day was Friday, isn't the next day?
No, I didn't say Friday. The first day is Yom Tov. I don't. Maybe I said that. I didn't mean that. First day in Eretz Yisrael. If the first day is the only day that's Yom Tov. I
understand what you're saying. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah. The first day. I'm sorry if I said Shabbos. I didn't mean to. The first day is Yom Tov in Eretz Yisrael. So once Yom Tov is over, you're all set because there's no longer an issue of owning it, and so there you fulfilled. Now, what happens if you have 5 children, 5 boys? And one is 5, one is 6, one is 7, one is, you have a number of boys. So each of these children, you will need to buy a lulav and esrog if you don't want to rely on the Shulchan Aruch leniency, which might be okay, which is, in other words, it's unclear how to learn the Shulchan Aruch, that maybe you could hold it with each child and fulfill the mitzvah, or you might have to buy them each their own. But again, in Eretz Yisrael, it's more lenient because all you're worried about is one day. Here, outside of Eretz Yisrael, you have to worry about 2 days. So whatever you mess up on the first day, like you give your lulav to your child on the first day, now you can't use it on the second day because according to some, we're supposed to be careful. All the chumras of the first day, we're supposed to be careful outside of Israel on the second day, the same chumras. So therefore, it would be problematic to give your child the lulav on the first day, even after you all shook with it, because you're supposed to own it yourself on the second day, because the second day is Yom Tov, similar to the first day, and therefore, this statement of Reb Zera is a very practical halacha. It messes things up and obligates us to buy extra lulavim. Now, the next statement of Reb Zera, never tell a child that I'm going to give you something, and don't not give it to him. Because you're teaching the child to lie. And Shnever, as it says, limdu l'shainim daber sheker. Teach your tongue to that the people who sinned. He was talking about the people who sinned. He says they teach with their tongues to speak words that aren't true. So, what comes out from this? Why does the Gemara bring this statement? So on a very simple level, Reb Zera said one statement. The Gemara says, okay, let's say another statement of Reb Zera. However, there is an understanding here that maybe they're connected. Don't trick your child and make him think that he has a kosher lulav and esrog and it's not kosher. Don't try to trick him into getting out of buying him a lulav and esrog by saying, oh, it's good enough, this, that. Don't lie to him. In other words, it's a continuation of the previous halacha that you got to make sure that you fulfill the mitzvah properly. And by doing that, you might think, well, maybe I'll give my kid, a lemon or some other thing. So it could be at least one way of learning this Gemara is Reb Zera says, don't tell your child something that's not true, or that I'm going to give you something and you don't give it to him, and you're basically teaching him to lie. And so that's the statement of, that's the other statement of Reb Zera. But I guess on a very simple level, it's just mentions one statement from Reb Zera. It mentions another statement with the first statement is talking about also chinuch, letting your child fulfill a mitzvah. Here, the Reb Zera continues and he mentions about being careful that children learn from what you do, not necessarily from what you say, but what you do. And especially here, you say one thing, you do another thing. They see that your words and your, that they'll learn to lie. Okay, we're going to stop here. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone.
Shabbos. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.